Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on today's show, an updated 53-man roster projection right before the Texans start their training camp practices. I'll break down my updated 53-man roster after some news and rumors, mostly a lot of roster news coming this week for the Houston Texans. And let's get right into that news. First up, Dylan Delgado on X. This is what he posted at 4:17 today. The Texans waived UDFA Jackson Janke. Texans waived rookie Ladarius Henderson and Phildarius Payne. The Texans placed Dylan Horton on the football illness list. The Texans placed D'Angelo Ross, Delshawn Phillips, and Andrew Beck on the PUP list. So there you have it. Janke and Henderson and Payne all waived before training camp. Ladarius Henderson waived with an injury designation. He had a surgery on his foot. So we already see some of the roster moves, some of the, mixing and matching transactions going on with the Houston Texans leading into training camp practices. And then Aaron Wilson, he added on this note on X as well. Texans don't have any designations for Laremy Tunsil, Tytus Howard, Tegan Quatoriano, meaning they are active heading into training camp. So all those guys, I believe he also added after this MJ Stewart as well. So all those guys good to go for the start of training camp. And then obviously we broke down two of these signings already in Malik Fisher and Quintez Cephas, but the Texans also signed a guard, Chris Reed, a veteran interior offensive lineman, to add to that offensive line depth. So obviously a lot of moves happening, a lot of Texans news happening right now leading into training camp. That's another reason why you got to hit that sub button and make sure you have your notifications turned on. So if there is any breaking news, anything happens around the Houston Texans, you'll be the first to be notified. So go down and click that bell icon and select the all option. These are some people who I know for a fact have their notifications turned on. The First Commenter Club. All you got to do, be one of the first people to comment on one of my videos, and I'll probably give you a shout-out on a future one. This is the First Commenter Club from a video from yesterday. Arturo, Pick Six, Kevin, Football Rocks, O'Neal, I salute you. Thank you all for being the first commenters on my video yesterday. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I truly do appreciate it, guys. Now let's get into this 53-man roster projection. First up, the quarterbacks. And obviously it's the big three, C.J. Stroud, Davis Mills, Case Keenum. But I had to change it up a little bit with this one. I wanted to make some room for some other guys on the roster in other places. So unlike other times, I'm actually only keeping two on the roster. I'm keeping C.J. Stroud. I'm keeping Davis Mills. And I hope this is how the Texans eventually shape their roster, because Case Keenum, I love Case Keenum. I'm born and raised in Houston, former U of H Cougar, played well with the Texans in the past whenever he started for them. I just don't think he really gives you a lot being on the roster. I'd rather keep him on this team as a, player coach, have him come in if needed, if there's an injury, sign him. But I'd rather him not take up a 53-man roster spot and still be able to pay him to keep him around in Houston, if that's possible. I know he's probably going to have a roster spot, but in a perfect ideal world, I'd like the Texans to just keep two in C.J. Stroud and Davis Mills. Let's go on to the running back / fullback room, and obviously you have Joe Mixon, Damian Pierce, DeMeco Ryans called them his 1-2 punch going into this year, and then you drafted Jawar Jordan late in this year's draft, so I think you keep those three guys. Also, I'm going to say you keep Dare Agumbawale, because he's a really good special teams guy to have on your team with the new special teams rules. Frank Ross, I think they're going to have an emphasis on keeping some guys who are really good in the special teams. And I know this really shouldn't go into consideration, but he can also kick if you need. I know Kaimi Fairbairn got injured last year. He's the reason why the Texans beat the Bucs. He had a huge field goal in that game. So, a guy who can do a lot of things, a Swiss Army knife. I know it sounds silly, but being able to kick is a huge plus to have in a positional player. And then I also, for this one, I kept Andrew Beck. I know he's one of the guys for DeMeco and company. He's a really, well-liked guy in the locker room and throughout the coaching staff. So I'm in my roster projection for this time around, I'm going to go ahead and keep Andrew Beck. Going to the wide receiver room, and this one's always been a toughie for me because I don't know, obviously, past the top four guys, who they're going to keep after Stefon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and John Mechie. Yes, I know my sentiment towards the beginning of the offseason was Noah Brown was a lock to make this roster because he got that $5 million contract at the start of free agency, but the closer and closer we get, and I don't know how he's going to be, medically going into training camp in the preseason. I don't know if his spot on this roster is a lock per se anymore. I would think it is. I think that he's really safe, but I'm just totally not sure. So I ask you, out of these 4 guys, you can only keep 2 of them on the roster. Who would you keep? Let me know down in the comment section. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's video. If you could only choose 2 of these guys to keep on the roster, who are you choosing between Noah Brown, Robert Woods, Ben Skowronek, and Xavier Hutchinson? A little bit of a surprise on this one. I went ahead and kept Ben Skowronek and Xavier Hutchinson. I have a feeling like it's going to be Noah Brown, but I just don't know if he can stay healthy. So that's why I'm kind of, veering off, going a little bit different on this 53-man roster projection and going with the younger guy in Xavier Hutchinson and Ben Skowronek. I know Xavier has been working a ton, also trying to get into special teams a little bit to help out in that. The Texans, they traded for Ben Skowronek in this offseason, ran a very similar style offense to what the Texans are going to run with Bobby Slowick with the LA Rams and Sean McVay. So I think that transition could be pretty seamless for Ben coming into this Texans offense. I do think Noah Brown, if he's fully healthy, will have a roster spot. But it's a big if he's going to be 100% at the start of this season. Now, let's go into the tight end room, and this one might be the easiest room in my opinion. You have Dalton Schultz, Brevin Jordan, Cade Stover. You saw at the beginning of the show, Tegan Quatoriano, good to go in camp. He's going to be really fighting for his spot on this roster. At the end of the day, I think the Texans only keep 3. I think they keep Dalton Schultz, Brevin Jordan, Cade Stover. It's kind of been chalk, been what I've said the entire time. These 3 guys, I think, are locks to make this Texans roster. Now, we go to the offensive line room. And this is this is where you got to make some cuts. This is where you got to really decide who you're keeping on this roster and who you're not. You obviously have your top 5 starters, and then I think Kendrick Green, Jarrett Patterson, Blake Fisher, those 3 guys are going to make it. So then I came to the decision between, am I going to keep a Charlie Heck or a David Sharp? I went with David Sharp. I know Charlie Heck, he's played well in stints for the Texans, really has had bad luck with his injury history. I think the Texans are going to go a little bit on the safer route, go with the veteran in David Sharp. So I think they keep 9 on the roster going into the regular season, and these are the 9 guys I think they're going to keep. Now, coming up, defensive projections for the 53-man roster. Who are going to fill out those other 28 spots the Texans have on their final 53? I'll get into the defensive side in just a moment, but if you need some Texans gear, I have a great deal for you. All these items are on sale right now with our friends over at Fanatics. You go to chatsports.com/Texans sale. You'll be able to see all these items over there available. A lot of them going out of stock because they're sale items, obviously. They're trying to get rid of some of this stuff. So go check it out today. I want to put that link down in the comment section and description of today's video. Chatsports.com/Texans sale. Our friends with Fanatics, they'll have you covered on some relatively cheap Texans gear and Texans, memorabilia and stuff of that nature. Now let's go on the defensive side of the football. The defensive line is where we're going to start. With the news of Dylan Horton being placed on the illness list, I'm not sure if his spot as a defensive end is going to be a foregone conclusion. Texans went ahead and signed Jerry Hughes this past week, the veteran who's been on the team for the past 2 seasons. I think this is how their defensive ends, their edge rushers are going to pan out. You have Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter. I think Derek Barnett is going to be somebody who makes this roster. He played very well for this team at the end of last year after they acquired him, after he was let go by the Philadelphia Eagles. Jerry Hughes, I think they brought him back for a reason. I think he makes the roster. And then the late round pick out of USC, Solomon Byrd, has that last spot on the defensive ends. Now, for the defensive tackles on the interior, these are the 5 that I have. Denico Autry, Foley Fatukasi. I think Khalil Davis earns one of those spots. I think free agent acquisition Tim Settle earns one of those spots. And then another late round pick, Marcus Harris. I think he rounds out the defensive tackles that the Texans are going to keep going into this season. Next up, linebacking room. Christian Harris, Azeez Al-Shaiir, Henry To'oTo'o, maybe? Big maybe on Henry To'oTo'o. He has a lot to prove during training camp in the preseason. And DeMeco, he's a former linebacker. I think he keeps 6 linebackers on this roster, especially because of the amount of, special teams ability some of these guys bring. And notably, Jamal Hill is somebody who I want y'all to focus on. There, I have obviously 6 guys: Azeez, Christian, Henry Toto, Jacob Phillips, Neville Hewitt. But Jamal Hill is also a former safety. He played safety for multiple years in college. I think he makes this roster as a linebacker, but don't be surprised if they work him into other packages in the nickel and dime, plays a kind of mock safety linebacker hybrid. I could see DeMeco working that in with Jamal Hill, the rookie out of Oregon. Now, going to the secondary, I'm going to look at the cornerbacks first. Derek Stingley Jr., Kamari Lassiter, Desmond King. That's who I think is going to be your 3 starters going into this season, so they're obviously going to make the roster. And then I had 2 more spots to give out for this cornerback room, and I couldn't deviate from Jeff Okudah and C.J. Henderson. Maybe Miles Bryant, maybe somebody else surprises me, but I think these are the 5 most obvious guys. I mean, unless they go out and sign somebody like a Xavier Howard, like a Stephon Gilmore, I think these 5 guys are going to be the 5 that you keep on the roster at the cornerback position going into the regular season, which leaves 4 more spots for the safety position. Your top 3 guys: Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie, Kalen Bullock. Then I had a decision to make between the bottom 4. Lonnie Johnson Jr., former early-round pick from the Houston Texans. Eric Murray, MJ Stewart, and Brandon Hill, the 7th-round pick from last year, who didn't end up making the team. I'm going to just go chalk. I'm going to go Eric Murray. I think he's the best out of the rest of those guys, and I think he makes that final roster spot for this Texans defense, which leaves 3 spots, obviously, for the 3 best players on this team: Tommy Townsend, Kaimi Fairbairn, and our Lord and Savior, John Weeks, who's been with the Texans for, it seems like, 40 years. But those are the guys that round out your Texans' final 53-man roster projection before the start of training camp. What do you think? Who did I miss? Was I completely off base? Was I totally wrong? Grade my projection down in the comments section, and maybe send a little hate my way. Let me know where I messed up, where I went wrong. Let me know down in the comments section. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, my DMs are always open. You can hit me up at Jeremy Chuggs, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't miss any of our videos. Texans content, it's going to start ramping up. We have training camp, and we're less than a month away from the Hall of Fame game up against the Chicago Bears. We'll have it all here on the channel for you. We'll break it all down. We'll have live watch parties for the preseason games. So stick around, hit that sub button, turn on your notifications. Let's have a great year, Texans fans.